gardeners, and welcome back. As you can see, I went and inspected the pumpkin and it had basically rotted inside out. It happens. So all I did was cut that up, pieces dirt into the worm bin. But for my neck of the woods, talking about it's going to be like 33, maybe 29. They're talking about possible frost. No, in that case it would be a freeze. So what do you do when you run into this problem? Well, normally what you would do is if you have a crop that you want to protect, you would cover it with some frost cloth. You just cannot have anything touching the plant, because if that cloth is touching the plant, when it freezes, it will kill the plant. No ands, if, whats, or exceptions. And it's also true of any pots that you have that are not frost resistant. For example, that pot, I don't know if it's frost resistant, so I'll bring it aside. Any tropical plants that you have, you would need to bring out of the elements. For example, this rosemary plant, I will be bringing this into the garage. The asparagus fern, Boston fern, whatever you want to call it, I think it's an asparagus fern, that will have to come in. The ones that you can't bring in, you want to mulch the roots. You saw me in the previous video. That will help keep the roots warm. By keeping the roots warm, it keeps the plant alive. It's like this plant I'm not even gonna care about. These peppers I'm not even gonna care about. That will just go in the compost. End of story. The elderberry over there is perfectly fine, it can withstand it. The bees, if you're wondering about that, well, and I said mulch, let me back up here. And I said mulch, something like this. This plant would be perfectly fine. The other plant, the other blackberry may be fine as well. The bees themselves, you don't have to worry too much about them. The main thing that you want is for them to start working on having honey. And you see they're busy, because they will eat the honey during the winter. Basically, they just form a tight ball, a cluster, and they just move all the way up. The two enemies that you're going to have during the winter is mites and starvation. There's ways to fend off starvation, but your mites are going to be the number one issue. Now let's talk about the next thing, about if you have a worm farm, what do you do to keep them warm? What some people will do is they will wrap a fleece blanket around this and then use that as an insulation. What I like to do is, one, run a heater. Two, if you put some newspaper on this, this right here, see how wet this is? This has 10 degrees. 10 degree modifier. The next thing I do is I will bulk up on my green material, my food. You see how this is, even because I just put that pumpkin in there. You see right here? That will actually act, that will heat up. So the worms can generate heat for nothing. And you can also use the second law of thermodynamics. Energy cannot be created, but it can be converted. What I'm doing is taking that water, enough of that. Second law of thermodynamics. Energy cannot be created, but converted. So I'll actually add more water, and that water will turn into heat vapor. that vapor will hit the top of the lid. It will condense, go back into the cycle, and rinse and repeat. That's how I can keep my worms warm because they're cold-blooded. I want this bin to be between 60 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit because that is where the metabolism of the worms operate the best, so I can keep this chugging. If it gets real cold, I will actually pull this in the garage. The trick with doing with winter, or first freeze, frost, and I'm getting swarmed by bees, is not panicking but having an answer plan. I'll talk about the plants as soon as I get this door to agree with me. Okay. What do you do with pots that you can't move? Well, your main thing is to keep the roots warm. This I need to add bulk up some more. It'll be perfectly fine. Let me find one that's a good example. Like this plant, I have never worried about mulching, and you see it's perfectly fine. But this plant right here, this Jerusalem artichoke, I'm not gonna mess with it. I've been told, from what I've read and heard from other people that have grown this before, is the taste gets a little more enhanced for the first freeze. And I'm not even worried about this pot. If it was a pot I would worry about, like say this guy right here, I would pull this into a more sheltered area or straight into the garage. These pots I don't even worry about. I've left them out here for years. If it does freeze over the weekend, basically you're going to see all this stuff get wiped out. They're not tolerant to frost. And even the peas in the back there that are blooming, there's not a whole lot I can do about that. This is why I don't like doing fall and winter gardens. Even this basil right here, this will get wiped out. So we'll see what happens. There's not a whole lot I can do. This means that if it gets wiped out, this goes straight in the composter. That's the reason why I prefer doing more spring. Now I'm supposed to take this down for the winter. It's not quite winter yet. When I say this, it's a butterfly house. I need to clean it out, but it's not quite ready, so I'm going to leave it up for the weekend, see what happens. The lettuce over there would be perfectly fine. This depends. So the more you do now, the easier it gets later. I don't know if you can see it, but you can see the bees are just swarming. So I know I have a good hive. And any succulents I just now remembered. Like these alvaras will have to go inside because they cannot take freezing weather. So if you have any plants you favor, you can drag them into the garage and you can run a heater underneath them. You can take them into your house, whatever. Any pots that you don't have, you can mulch the top of the roots, top of the plant to keep it warm. Now some people will actually bury the pots. It's not, I don't see the point in it because I find it to be counterproductive, because how you know if you're gonna remember that pot's still there come spring? I must forever just empty out the pots when they die off, and off we go. So, like I said, just don't panic too much. Have an action plan and act on it, and try to have it ready. When I say tropical plants, like your tropical hibiscus, like a Boston fern, succulents. So we'll see what happens come Monday. It's not uncommon for us to have frost or freezing weather on Halloween. It's very, very rare.